You think you're building an empire. Waking up at 4 a.m. Cold showers. 100-hour work weeks. Sacrificing relationships for revenue. You call it discipline. They call it the Grindset. But here's what nobody tells you. You're not the architect of this obsession. You're the product. 500 years ago, a Florentine diplomat named Niccolò Machiavelli wrote a manual for princes on how to control populations through calculated manipulation. He understood something profound about human nature. People don't need chains to be enslaved. They need a narrative that makes slavery feel like freedom. Today's Grindset culture is that narrative perfected. It's Machiavellian manipulation, dressed in motivational quotes and LinkedIn posts. The modern prince isn't a monarch. It's a system. A system that convinced you that your worth equals your productivity, that rest is weakness, that boundaries are excuses. And the most brilliant part? You police yourself. You shame others who don't comply. You've become both the prisoner and the guard. Machiavelli warned us that the most effective control is invisible. The kind where subjects believe they're choosing their own chains. This isn't about motivation. This is about manipulation. And by the end of this video, you'll see exactly how deep this protocol runs. Welcome to the Machiavelli Protocol. I'm here to decode the psychological warfare hiding behind your favorite productivity influencers' content. Because what you're about to discover isn't just theory. It's a systematic breakdown of how modern power structures use your ambition against you. Machiavelli's The Prince wasn't just a book about ruling kingdoms. It was a psychological blueprint for controlling human behavior through strategic manipulation. And every single principle he outlined is being deployed right now in the culture that tells you to hustle harder. The Grindset isn't grassroots. It's engineered. Designed to extract maximum output while making you feel grateful for the exhaustion. We're going to walk through the exact mechanisms. The language patterns, the social proof tactics, the fear-based motivation, the identity manipulation. All of it pulled straight from Machiavelli's Playbook and repackaged for the algorithm age. Before we go deeper, I need you to do something. Drop a comment right now telling me what time you woke up today and whether you felt guilty about it. Seriously, I want to see how deep this programming goes. Because awareness is the first step to deprogramming. And trust me, once you see these patterns, you can't unsee them. Let's start with Machiavelli's most famous principle. It is better to be feared than loved. Now, Grindset culture doesn't use fear in the traditional sense. Nobody's threatening you with physical violence if you sleep 8 hours. But they've created something far more insidious. Social fear. The fear of being left behind. Of being average. Of being exposed as lazy or uncommitted. Scroll through any entrepreneur's Instagram and you'll see it. While you were sleeping, I was building. Most people will never understand this level of commitment. You're either growing or dying. Every single one of these statements creates a binary. A false choice between extreme productivity and complete failure. This is textbook Machiavellian manipulation. Create an enemy. Make people fear becoming that enemy. Then position yourself as the only path to safety. The enemy in Grindset culture isn't a person. It's a version of yourself. The lazy version. The version that takes weekends off. The version that prioritizes relationships over revenue. And here's the psychological trick. Because this enemy is internal, you can never fully defeat it. You can never prove you're not lazy enough. There's always someone waking up earlier, working harder, sacrificing more. This creates a perpetual anxiety loop. A hamster wheel of proving your worth through increasingly extreme behaviors. Machiavelli understood that fear-based control is most effective when it's self-sustaining. When the population polices itself. And that's exactly what's happening. You're not just afraid of being lazy. You're afraid of being perceived as lazy. So you perform productivity. You post your 5 a.m. workout. You humble brag about how little you slept. You turn your exhaustion into social currency. Because in this economy, rest is weakness. And weakness is death. But here's what Machiavelli also knew. Fear-based systems eventually collapse. Because humans aren't machines. We have biological limits, psychological breaking points. The Grindset culture knows this too. That's why they've built in a secondary control mechanism. Aspiration. For every fear-based message, there's an aspirational counterpart. The private jet, the luxury watch, the financial freedom. This is Machiavelli's carrot and stick perfected. Fear of failure on one side, promise of extraordinary success on the other. And you, caught in the middle, running faster and faster on a treadmill that never stops. The most brilliant part of this manipulation? It's completely legal. Nobody's forcing you to participate. You're choosing this. Or at least, that's what you believe. But choice under manufactured fear isn't really choice. It's compliance disguised as autonomy. Machiavelli wrote that the greatest trick of power is making subjects believe they're free while controlling every option available to them. The Grindset gives you options. Wake up at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. Work 80 hours or 100 hours. Sacrifice your health or your relationships. See the pattern? Every option leads to the same outcome, your exploitation. And the system profits from every choice you make. The course you buy to optimize your morning routine. The supplements to manage your stress. The productivity app to track your every minute. You're not building an empire. You're funding one. And the emperors are the ones selling you the shovels while you dig. Now let's talk about Machiavelli's second principle. The ends justify the means. In Grindset culture, this translates to a very specific narrative. Success excuses everything. Neglected your family while building your business? They'll understand when you're rich. Destroyed your mental health chasing a goal? Worth it for the achievement. Burned every bridge to get to the top? Lonely at the summit is still better than crowded at the bottom. This is moral manipulation at its finest. By positioning success as the ultimate virtue, the system gives you permission to abandon every other value. Integrity becomes negotiable. Compassion becomes weakness. Balance becomes mediocrity. Machiavelli advised princes to appear virtuous while being willing to act viciously when necessary. Modern Grindset influencers do exactly this. They post about gratitude and mindfulness. Then in the next breath, tell you to cut off anyone who doesn't support your vision. They talk about family values, while admitting they haven't seen their kids awake in weeks. This cognitive dissonance is intentional. It keeps you confused, uncertain about what's actually right. And in that uncertainty, you defer to the authority figure, the influencer who seems to have it all figured out. But here's the dark truth Machiavelli understood. Those who preach the ends justify the means are usually the ends being justified. They're not teaching you to be ruthless for your benefit. They're teaching you to be ruthless so you'll accept their ruthlessness toward you. Think about it. The course that costs 3 months of your salary, justified because it'll make you millions. The mastermind that requires you to go into debt, justified because you're investing in yourself. The coaching program that demands you cut off unsupportive friends, justified because you need to protect your energy. Every single one of these is the influencer using Machiavellian tactics on you, while teaching you to use them on others. It's a pyramid of manipulation, and you're somewhere in the middle, manipulating those below you, being manipulated by those above you, all while believing you're on a heroic journey of self-improvement. Machiavelli also wrote about the importance of appearing religious while using religion for political ends. Today's version? Appearing spiritual while using spirituality for commercial ends. How many Grindset influencers talk about manifestation? About the universe rewarding hard work? About energy and vibration? This isn't spirituality. It's spiritual bypassing weaponized for productivity. It takes ancient wisdom about presence and contentment, and twists it into justification for endless striving. You didn't get the result you wanted? Your energy was off. Your vibration was low. You didn't believe hard enough. Notice how the system is never wrong. Only you are. This is classic Machiavellian blame shifting. The prince never fails. The subjects fail the prince. The grindset never fails. You fail the grindset. And the solution is always the same. More courses, more coaching, more sacrifice, more proof of your commitment. Machiavelli understood that sustainable power requires subjects to blame themselves for systemic failures. And grindset culture has perfected this. Every burnout is a personal failure. Every mental health crisis is a mindset problem. Every business that fails is because you didn't want it badly enough. The structure itself is never questioned. Because questioning the structure means questioning the influencers who profit from it. And they've already established themselves as the successful ones, the ones who made it work. So if it's not working for you, the problem must be you. Let's examine Machiavelli's principle of maintaining power through division. He wrote that a prince should encourage factions among subjects, because divided people are easier to control. Grindset culture does this masterfully. It creates artificial divisions in the population. The 5 a.m. club versus the lazy masses. The entrepreneurs versus the employees. The winners versus the losers. The disciplined versus the weak. These divisions serve a specific purpose. They prevent collective awareness. If everyone waking up exhausted compared notes, they might realize the system is broken. But if you're told you're special for enduring it, you won't seek solidarity. You'll seek superiority. This is why grindset content is so focused on separation, on being different, on not being like everyone else. It's not about your uniqueness. It's about your isolation. Because isolated people are controllable people. They can't organize, can't collectively bargain, can't demand better conditions. They can only compete. Race to the bottom of who can sacrifice more, who can endure more, who can prove their worth more completely. Machiavelli advised princes to give people just enough hope to prevent rebellion, but not enough power to threaten the throne. Sound familiar? The grindset gives you just enough success stories to keep believing, just enough small wins to keep grinding, just enough possibility to prevent you from questioning why the game is designed this way. But you'll notice something about those success stories. They're always individual, never collective. One person who made it, never a system that works for everyone. This is intentional. Because if success were systematic and replicable, you wouldn't need the influencer. You wouldn't need the course. You wouldn't need the constant content consumption. By keeping success rare and seemingly random, they maintain their position as necessary guides, as the ones who crack the code, as the gatekeepers to the life you want. Machiavelli also understood the power of spectacle, of public displays that reinforce the social order. Today's version is the highlight reel, the private jet photo, the luxury car, the exotic location. These aren't just flexes. They're psychological anchors, reminding you of the hierarchy, showing you what's possible if you submit to the system, demonstrating the rewards of compliance. And here's the manipulation. These displays trigger your mirror neurons. Your brain literally simulates having those things, releases dopamine, creates a craving, not for the thing itself, but for the status it represents, the proof that you made it, that you're not average, that you escaped the masses. This is why grindset culture is so focused on external markers of success. Because internal fulfillment doesn't photograph well, doesn't create envy, doesn't drive engagement, doesn't sell courses. Machiavelli knew that subjects needed visible proof of the prince's power. Today's influencers know you need visible proof of the grindset's rewards. So they manufacture it, rent the mansion for the photo shoot, lease the car for the content, stage the lifestyle to sell the dream. And you, watching from your apartment at 11 p.m. after a 12-hour workday, believe it's real. Believe it's attainable. Believe that if you just grind harder, that could be you. Now we need to discuss Machiavelli's most subtle principle, the one that makes all the others possible. Control the narrative, control reality. Machiavelli understood that power isn't just about force. It's about story. About who gets to define what's true, what's valuable, what's worthy. Grindset culture has completely dominated the narrative around work, success, and human worth. They've redefined rest as laziness, balance as mediocrity, boundaries as weakness, self-care as self-indulgence. And they've done it so effectively that you probably felt defensive reading those sentences. Because the programming runs deep. This narrative control operates on multiple levels. First, there's the language. Notice how Grindset culture has its own vocabulary. You don't work hard, you execute. You don't have goals, you have targets. You don't rest, you recover strategically. This linguistic shift isn't accidental. It's reframing, making exploitation sound like optimization, making exhaustion sound like excellence, making unsustainable sound like unstoppable. Machiavelli advised princes to control the terms of debate, because whoever controls the language controls the thought. If the only words available to describe your experience are Grindset words, you can only think Grindset thoughts. You literally lack the vocabulary to articulate an alternative. Second, there's the social proof. Grindset culture surrounds you with examples of people who claim it works. Testimonials, success, stories, transformations. This creates a false consensus. Makes you believe that everyone successful thinks this way, lives this way, sacrifices this way. But here's what you don't see: the survivorship bias. For every person posting their success, there are thousands who burned out, who failed, who sacrificed everything and got nothing. But they're not posting. They're not visible. They've been edited out of the narrative. Machiavelli understood that controlling what people see controls what they believe is possible. Modern algorithms have made this even more effective. You're fed an endless stream of Grindset success, while failure is algorithmically suppressed, doesn't get engagement, doesn't get promoted, doesn't exist in your feed. So your reality becomes skewed. You think success is more common than it is, failure more rare, the Grindset more effective. Third, there's the identity manipulation. This is the deepest level. Grindset culture doesn't just tell you what to do. It tells you who to be. You're not someone who works hard. You're a grinder, an entrepreneur, a savage, a beast. These identity labels are incredibly powerful, because once you adopt an identity, you'll defend it, even against your own interests, even when it's destroying you. Because admitting the Grindset is harmful means admitting your identity is based on a lie. And that's psychologically devastating. So instead, you double down, work harder, sacrifice more, prove the identity true. This is why people stay in the Grindset long after it stops serving them. They're not protecting a strategy. They're protecting a sense of self. Machiavelli wrote that the most stable power comes from subjects who can't imagine an alternative, who've internalized the system so completely it becomes their personality. That's what Grindset culture has achieved. It's not just something you do, it's who you are. And questioning it feels like self-annihilation. Let's talk about what Machiavelli called the appearance of virtue. He advised princes to seem moral while being willing to act immorally. Grindset culture has perfected this. Every influencer talks about giving back, about impact, about changing lives. But look at their actual business model. High-ticket courses that most people can't afford. Masterminds that require going into debt. Affiliate links on every recommendation. The appearance is altruism. The reality is extraction. They're not teaching you to fish. They're selling you fishing lessons, then selling you the rod, then the bait, then access to the pond, then the community of other fishermen. And if you don't catch fish, It's because you didn't buy enough, didn't commit enough, didn't believe enough. Machiavelli understood that people judge by appearances, by what they see, not what is. So Grindset influencers carefully curate their image. They show the wins, not the losses. The highlights, not the reality. The freedom, not the cost. And you, consuming this content, make decisions based on incomplete information, based on a deliberately constructed illusion. This is why the Grindset narrative is so focused on transformation. Before and after, rags to riches, nobody to somebody. These stories are compelling. They trigger hope, but they also hide the survivorship bias, the luck, the privilege, the timing, the circumstances that can't be replicated. Machiavelli knew that people need heroes, need to believe in the possibility of rising. So princes should provide those stories, while ensuring the actual mechanisms of power remain obscure. Today's version is the self-made myth, the idea that anyone can make it if they just work hard enough. This myth serves multiple purposes. It justifies inequality. If success is purely about effort, then poverty is about laziness. Wealth is deserved, poverty is chosen. This removes any responsibility from the system, any need to examine structural barriers, any obligation to create fair conditions. It also creates shame. If you're not successful, it's your fault. Your lack of discipline, your weak mindset, your insufficient sacrifice. This shame keeps you compliant, keeps you buying, keeps you grinding, because the alternative is admitting you're lazy, weak, unworthy, and humans will do almost anything to avoid that admission. Machiavelli wrote that effective control makes subjects grateful for their subjugation, makes them believe their chains are choices, their exploitation is opportunity, their exhaustion is excellence. That's the Grindset in a sentence. Now we arrive at perhaps the darkest Machiavellian principle, the strategic use of hope. Machiavelli advised that subjects should always believe improvement is possible, that their current suffering is temporary, that reward is just around the corner, because hopeful people endure, hopeless people rebel. Grindset culture is a hope delivery system. Every piece of content promises that you're close, that the breakthrough is coming, that this next strategy will be the one, just one more course, one more quarter of sacrifice, one more year of grinding, and you'll have the freedom, the wealth, the life you want. But notice how the timeline keeps extending. The goalpost keeps moving. You hit the revenue target, but now you need to scale. You scale, but now you need to optimize. You optimize, but now you need to diversify. There's always another level, another milestone, another sacrifice required. This is intentional, because if you ever actually arrived, you'd stop consuming, stop buying, stop grinding. You'd realize you have enough, and enough is the enemy of this system. Machiavelli understood that satisfied people are ungovernable. They don't need the prince, don't fear his threats, don't crave his promises. So the prince must ensure satisfaction remains always just out of reach, close enough to seem possible, far enough to require continued striving. This is the psychological trap of Grindset culture. It promises freedom through achievement, but achievement never brings freedom. Because the definition of achievement keeps changing, the target keeps moving, the standard keeps rising. You're running a race with no finish line, and the exhaustion you feel isn't a sign you're doing it wrong. It's proof the system is working exactly as designed, to extract maximum effort, maximum consumption, maximum compliance, for minimum actual reward. Machiavelli also wrote about the importance of occasional rewards, small victories that reinforce the system. Grindset culture does this through micro-successes, the small win, the minor breakthrough, the incremental progress. These aren't accidents. They're carefully timed dopamine hits, just enough to keep you believing, to keep you invested. to prevent you from stepping back and seeing the larger pattern. Because if you zoomed out, you'd see the truth. That you're working harder for less, sacrificing more for diminishing returns, trading your finite life for infinite promises. But you can't zoom out because you're too busy grinding, too exhausted to think critically, too invested to walk away. And that's exactly where they need you. We need to examine the final Machiavellian principle, the one that ties everything together. Normalize the abnormal. Make the extremes seem reasonable. Make the unsustainable seem necessary. Make the exploitative seem aspirational. Grindset culture has normalized things that would have seemed insane a generation ago. Working while sick is dedication. Skipping meals is efficiency. Sleeping 4 hours is discipline. Ignoring your family is focus. Destroying your health is investment. These aren't virtues. They're symptoms of a sick system. But through constant repetition, they've become standards, expectations, requirements for being taken seriously. Machiavelli knew that people adapt to their conditions. That what seems extreme today becomes normal tomorrow. That you can boil a frog slowly. And that's what's happened. The Grindset has slowly increased the temperature, slowly raised the bar, slowly redefined what's acceptable. Until you're living in conditions you would have rejected outright if they'd been presented all at once. But they weren't. They were introduced gradually. First it was wake up early. Then it was wake up really early. Then it was cold showers too. Then it was fasting. Then it was no weekends. Then it was no vacations. Each step seemed small, reasonable, just a little more than before. But the cumulative effect is extreme, is unsustainable, is designed to break you. And when you break, the system has an answer. You weren't committed enough, didn't want it badly enough, didn't have what it takes. The system never fails. Only you do. This is Machiavellian gaslighting at scale, making you doubt your own perception, your own limits, your own reality. Because if you trusted yourself, you'd realize this is insane, that humans aren't meant to function this way, that rest isn't weakness, that balance isn't mediocrity, that your worth isn't determined by your productivity. But the Grindset has convinced you otherwise, has convinced you that your instincts are wrong, your needs are excuses, your boundaries are limitations to overcome. Machiavelli wrote that the perfect subject is one who polices themselves, who internalizes the prince's values so completely they no longer need external enforcement. That's you. Waking up at 4 a.m. not because anyone's forcing you, but because you've internalized the belief that you should. Working through exhaustion, not because you have to, but because you've accepted that you must. Sacrificing your well-being, not because it's required, but because you've been convinced it's virtuous. You've become your own oppressor. And that's the ultimate Machiavellian achievement. So where does this leave you? Now that you see the manipulation, now that you understand the protocol, now that you recognize the Machiavellian architecture behind the Grindset, what do you do with this awareness? First, understand that seeing the system doesn't immediately free you from it. The programming runs deep. You'll still feel guilty for resting, still feel anxious about doing less, still feel the pull of the grind. That's normal. That's the residue of conditioning. But awareness is the beginning of choice. You can't choose differently until you see that you're choosing. And most people in the Grindset don't realize they're choosing. They think they're responding to reality, to market demands, to competitive pressure. But those demands are manufactured. That pressure is engineered. That reality is constructed. And you can choose to stop participating, not all at once, not perfectly, but incrementally, consciously, deliberately. You can start asking different questions. Not, how can I do more? But what's actually enough? Not, how can I optimize this? But does this need to be done at all? Not, how can I win? But what game am I actually playing? These questions disrupt the protocol. They introduce variables the system can't account for, like meaning, like fulfillment, like actual human well-being. Second, recognize that opting out doesn't mean giving up. The Grindset has convinced you there are only two options: extreme productivity or complete failure. But that's a false binary. There's an entire spectrum between those extremes, where sustainable effort exists, where balanced ambition lives, where you can pursue goals without sacrificing your humanity. The Grindset culture doesn't want you to know this spectrum exists, because people operating in that middle space don't need their products, don't consume their content, don't perpetuate their system. They're ungovernable. And that's what Machiavelli feared most. People who couldn't be controlled through fear or hope, who defined success on their own terms, who refused to accept the manufactured narrative. You can be that person. But it requires something the Grindset has trained you to avoid: stillness, silence, space to think for yourself. Because in the constant noise of Grindset content, you never have time to question, to reflect, to consider alternatives. That's intentional. Busy people don't revolt. Exhausted people don't organize. Isolated people don't compare notes. So the system keeps you busy, keeps you exhausted, keeps you isolated. Third, understand that this isn't about individual solutions. The Grindset is a systemic problem, and systemic problems require collective responses. As long as everyone is competing individually, the system wins. But when people start connecting, comparing experiences, recognizing shared struggles, power shifts. This is why Grindset culture is so focused on individual responsibility, on personal development, on self-optimization. It keeps the focus internal, keeps you blaming yourself, keeps you from looking at the larger structure. Machiavelli knew that collective awareness was the greatest threat to power. That's why princes worked so hard to prevent it, to keep subjects divided, competing, isolated. Modern Grindset culture does the same. But you can choose connection over competition, solidarity over superiority, collective well-being over individual achievement. And in that choice, you begin to dismantle the protocol, not just for yourself, but for everyone trapped in the system. This is what Machiavelli couldn't account for. That once enough people see the manipulation, it loses its power. That awareness, shared and spread, becomes immunity. That the protocol only works on those who don't know it exists. Now you know. Now you see. Now you choose. Will you continue grinding? Or will you start living? The answer is yours. And that's the one thing the Machiavellian system can never take away. Your choice. Your awareness. Your refusal to be manipulated. Use it wisely. If you're ready to take these strategies beyond theory, check the pinned comment. The link I left there is the next step to becoming truly untouchable.